was my plan today to walk you step by step through the process of making a brooch with me. But it didn't quite go so well. Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Carol, and on this channel I show you how easy it is to make your own jewellery. Although after today you may not agree. Now you'll need to watch to the end of the video to see how I did this. Looks pretty nasty, doesn't it? Yeah, I tell you what, it feels pretty nasty too. Okay, so let's get started. I'll walk you step by step through the process of making this brooch, and I will show you where I went wrong and tell you how not to do the same thing. What I've got in front of me are all the supplies that you'll need to make this brooch. I'm going to start off with this 25mm perforated disc. And I've also got here a brooch back. Now this one is only 20mm, but it does fit nicely inside of the 25mm disc. As well, I've got 5 of these shell teardrops. These ones are 16 by 12. I've got 8 shell drops. These ones are 15mm. I don't think I need 8, but I'm going to just have a play with them. I've also got some teardrops here. These are 10 by 6, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to use those at the moment. I may use these black 6mm smooth round beads instead. Can't decide. And I've got some sapphire coloured 6mm crystal glass Druks. I've also got some head pins here. These ones are black because I wanted them to not be the feature of the beads. I've got some Fireline and I've got some super glue. In terms of tools, we'll need our chain nose pliers. We'll also need the flush cutters and a pair of round nose pliers. You could do this with a one-step looper also if you have that, instead of using your flush cutters and your round nose pliers. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Fireline. Oh, you'll need some scissors to cut your Fireline as well. And I'm going to start off by putting on my shell drops around the outside of my disc. Now it's all about making them sit in the right place. So what I'm aiming for, let's turn it up the right way, is to have the shells, I'm not really keen on that one, it's not very blue, have the shells sitting there and the other ones sitting at about the same level. So I'm thinking that what I will do is thread on my shell drop, and I'm not going to worry about a knot in the other end. I'm going to tie it off in a minute. And I'm going to put it through that second hole there in the second round. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm just going to pull it through. So that it's kind of sitting in the right place. Now I'm going to bring the thread back up through the next hole so that I can tie it off. Just going to tie a knot. So basically what I'm aiming for is to have my shell sitting in the right space. Now because I want it to stay flat, I'm actually going to take my thread and I'll just come in a bit closer. So you can see I'm coming out of that one. I'm actually going to go into this one. So down through there. Oops, I've lost my end. And I'm coming back up through the original hole, which is the one in the middle. Now you could do this with a needle if you wanted to, but I didn't really see there was much point because there's no small holes. And I'm going back through the drop. So basically what I'm doing is making sure that the drop isn't going to move that much. I want it to just be sitting in the right place. And now I'm going to tie a knot. And I'm going to tie another one. So that's what I have now. Next, I'm going to put some more drops around the outside. So as I said, I think I probably need 7. We'll see how we go. All right, so I want to go back down to the bottom. So just threading my Fireline through one of the holes. And now I want to come back up, and I want it to sit next to the next one. So I'm going to come back up through. Doing this so I can show you is a little bit more challenging than just doing it when you know how you would normally do it. So I've come back up through that hole there. Now I'm going to go through my bead. So that's going to sit about where I want it to. And now I'm going to play catch up with this other end of the thread, and I'm going to go across and down through the hole. So basically all you're doing here is making sure that you're just making sure that they stay on and that they sit in the right place. So it's not really rocket science. You're just kind of threading the thread through and tying it off so that they stay in the right place. And also you want to make sure that you are tying them well so that they don't fall off. So just going back up through one of the holes there, going through the middle one there. And I think I'll take this other side and put it down through on this side. If your thread does get a little manky on the end, you can always trim it off. So that's what I have now. It doesn't look pretty, but that's okay because it's going to be covered by the other shells, so we won't worry about that. So what I'm going to do is carry on with doing the same thing around until I have the whole of the disc, the outside of the disc, covered with the shells. Alright, so I've been around once and I've got 6 of my beads on there, and that looks pretty good. They are just overlapping a little bit in most places, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. So if I have a look at the back, it's not pretty, but that's okay because it's all going to be covered up. So basically all you're trying to do is make sure that it's nice and tight so that they don't fall off or become loose. So next we're going to do a round of the shell teardrops in pretty much the same way. So I'm taking my ends and I'm going to thread them. They're at the back at the moment, so I'm going to thread them up through so they're on the front. And I'm going to go in the round of holes that are not the center but second in from the center, like that. And the easiest way I found to do this was to go through the bead and then split the threads. So I'm going to put my ends together and go. Now I want to make sure these beads have a right and wrong side. So this side isn't as pretty as this side, so I want to make sure that one's going to sit at the top. So just going through the bead there. Okay. And I'm basically doing the same thing, but I want to make sure that these beads are going to sit about there. So exactly the same thing, just going down through the holes, back up and through the bead until they look like I want them to look. I've got 4 of my large teardrops on, and I thought I'd show you the process I used to put them on. So I did decide that I needed to use one of my collapsible eye needles, and as you can see I've completely destroyed it, but that's okay. So I've got my thread coming up from the bottom, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my strands, and the threads are coming up through the same hole. I'm just going to thread it onto my needle, and I'm going to go through my teardrop. The reason I needed to use the needle was because the teardrop holes are quite small, so when I got a couple of threads through I was having difficulty. Now I'm threading the other thread onto the needle, and I'm going through the bead the opposite way. So here's my tail here, so I'm going in from that end, that side, and this is why I needed the needle. It just made life a lot easier. So basically what you're doing is crossing the thread inside the bead. Okay, so now that will sit nice and flat, so I'm going to go back down through the disc and tie it off at the back. At this point you've got a long way, you're quite a long way away from the disc, so the needle just helps. Oops, it came undone. My thread is actually getting quite short on this one too, which makes it that little bit more challenging. And I don't want to thread a new piece because I'm nearly there. Just make sure that before you tie them off, that they're all sitting right. And now I'm going to tie that off at the back. Okay, so that's what I have now. It's very pretty. And it doesn't really matter that it's not sitting exactly right. It will be fine. When it's all done, it will look great. So I'm going to trim off my threads, just leaving a tiny tail. The back will cover it, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's what it looks like on the back. It's not very neat, but as I said, this will all be covered by that. Okay, so now we're going to make some dangles, and as I said, I haven't really decided whether or not I will use these teardrops or whether I should just use the round beads. So I'm actually thinking the teardrops might be quite nice, and I might just use the teardrops and maybe not use the round beads. Let's make some dangles and we'll have a play. So I'm taking my head pin and I'm threading it through my bead there, like that. And now I'm going to take my flush cutters. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to bend the wire over the top like that. So what I did then was I put my fingernail into that on the top of the bead and I pressed the wire over my fingernail. Gives you a nice good right angle. Now I'm going to take my flush cutters and I'm going to cut about 1 centimetre from the bend using the flush side of my cutters, holding the end of the wire so it doesn't fly away. And I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I'm going to make a loop. Now if you haven't made loops before, I've done a video on how to do that, so I'll leave a link in the description box below, as well as a card up the top. Now you do need to make sure these loops are really, really well closed. And mine isn't quite closed, so I'll give it a bit more of a wiggle. So there's my little dangle with its loop on the top. And I'm going to make a few more of those. So there's my 5 dangles there. And as I said, you do need to make sure that the loops are really, really well closed. So what I'm going to do next is take a piece of Fireline, and quite a long piece, probably almost 1 metre. And the reason I'm going to use so much is because I'm actually going to quadruple it. So I'm going to fold it in half, making my ends meet, find the middle, and then in half again. I just want it to be really, really secure. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to thread all 4 pieces through. Okay. Now, holding one end, because you don't want them to fall off the other end, thread on all of your 5 dangles. There we go. So that's what I have now. Now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go down through the center of my disc, wherever there's a spare hole. And then I'm going to turn it over and come back up through a different hole, wherever you can find a spare one. And you can remove your needle if you want. Mine seems to be well stuck on there. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie a knot. Now what I want to do is make sure my knot is hidden. So I want to kind of tie it so that it's sitting down inside there. And you'll see what I mean when you do this. It's really hard to explain. So I'm tying a knot and pulling it up so that it sits. You see how it popped, whoops, see how it popped all the way inside. And I'm going to tie another one. And your beads should sit really well in there like that. And you can play with them a bit, position them however you want. And now what I'm going to do is thread it back through with my needle again down to the bottom. My poor needle is looking so sad, it's just the collapsible eye is collapsed. I'm just going to try and open it up a little bit more. There we go. So pop through your, thread it on and go down through a hole, whichever one you can find, and out the back. Then remove the needle and do it exactly the same thing, but make sure you go through a different hole. So basically all you're doing here is bringing your threads to the back. My needle is so bent that I'm having difficulty aiming it in the right direction. Okay. All right. So now what you have on the back is your 2 lots of threads and they're coming out of different holes. So what we're going to do is tie them off. This is the last of your knots, so you want to make sure it's really well secured. I've got a weird short end there. There we go, that's better. And another knot. And just keep tying until you're happy that it's secured. I think I'm going to do 4. Whoops, I missed one. Now don't worry about how messy it is because it's all going to be covered, so we don't need to worry at all about that. And trim it off. You can leave a little bit of a tail because it will be covered, so there we go. Now what it looks like is that on the back and that on the front. Isn't it pretty? Now you could, if you wanted to, add another bead in the middle, maybe another blue one. And I actually think I might do that, so I'm going to, having said that was your last knot, I lied. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make another dangle. So I'm going to just repeat the process that I used to make the others. You know, when I'm making jewellery, this is what I do, and I tend to try, and maybe I don't like it, maybe I do. I just play until I find something that looks good or that I'm happy with. making sure my loop's really well closed. Right, some more Fireline. Probably don't need quite so much this time. I still want to fold it and fold it again, though, to make it nice and strong. I know Fireline's really strong, I'm just being paranoid. But hey, that's okay, it's my brooch. Okay. I'm going to come up from the bottom, just finding a hole wherever one is, and what I want to do is actually bring my needle up through the center of those beads. So all I want to do is bring my needle through, making sure that my tail stays on the back. Thread on my dangle, and go back down through the beads, through the disc again. Then we're just going to tie it off. Just before you tie that final knot though, just make sure that it's sitting in the right place. There we go. And there will be room for playing with it a little bit and repositioning it afterwards, and it will move as you wear it as well. So just tying that off. And trimming my threads. Okay, so there we go. So the only thing left to do is put the back on. Now I'm going to take my super glue, and I'm going to take my little disc here, my back, and I'm going to run some glue around the outside. Except my glue hole seems to be filled. Dear. Hopefully it will stick and we'll be all good. And I'll put the lid on that before I get it on any more of me, because I have managed to get it everywhere. Okay, so it's not sticking, so I'm going to put a little bit on the actual disc. Putting some glue on the thread will actually just make it stay much better anyway. Ow! 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 What a disaster, oh dear. So the super glue was really runny and it went all over everything, and what happened was I tried to clean it up with a microfiber cloth, and it had a chemical reaction with the super glue and it burned my thumb, and not only that, it stuck to all of my fingers. So I have spent the last hour trying to get the super glue off, but as you can see, it didn't quite happen. That is actually not super glue, that is my that white is actually blisters, so please do not use super glue for this project. I usually use E6000, but I was out and I thought, well, I've got some super glue, so I just used that, and it was really runny and just made a terrible mess. So lessons learned. Take it from me, don't use super glue. I hope with all the drama you got the gist of what I was up to. I was actually gluing the back of the brooch onto the brooch, and it did turn out okay, although what happened was I turned it over and I got glue all over the actual beads as well, so it was just a disaster. The photos at the beginning of this video are actually of the original brooch that I made. So what happened was my sister asked me to make a brooch for her daughter-in-law for Christmas, about 18 months ago now. and I really struggled. I couldn't get my head around what I was going to make, and I looked on YouTube for tutorials and I looked on Pinterest, couldn't find anything. So that's why I decided to share this with you today, maybe minus the disaster. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below if you've ever made a brooch. Remember also, if you've enjoyed this video, to subscribe to my channel and also like the video and ring the bell. That way you'll never miss a thing. And also check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching today. Have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.